last but not least, I want to thank Matthew Harold for filling in for me last week. I appreciate that. So with Carla's surgery tomorrow, I know some of you are familiar with a cochlear implant, but essentially tomorrow morning, one of the best doctors in the country who does this over in Cincinnati is going to do this for Carla, where they carefully put a very thin wire into the cochlea of her ear, you know, which is kind of that spiral thing, looks like a snail's shell or a nautilus, and then within a couple weeks they'll attach a hearing device to that so that it'll go right straight into Carla's inner ear, and then she'll have to relearn what the electronic signals are and how they relate to all of the words she's known her whole life. But the next couple weeks, to try to also take some of the stress off of me, we have a couple people from our community who are going to guest speak on Sunday. I will be here, and if Carla is feeling up to it, she will be here, but it usually takes me about 2 days each week to prepare the Sunday lesson for you. So this will be a great relief for me for the next couple of weeks to just allow some people from our community who have very powerful, inspiring stories to come share with you, and then in 2 weeks, Iva Nasser will also be sharing her workshop. So that's what's going on. So thank you, and I appreciate your prayer support for Carla and for me. So good morning. We do seem to have an animal theme this morning. I know the daily word, of course, was the animal blessing. And I know for Carla and I, we have a parrot, and seeing the divinity in that parrot is just so easy. It's just remarkable, just watching how a bird reacts. She'll be upset one moment, and the next very calm. And people, and I have with dogs, with cats. I have been very close to several dogs in my life. But in the book of Genesis, of course, at the beginning, it talks about how God created everything. But there's a part that was left out that I wanted to fill you in on, and that was that after God created everything, everything came to God to ask what its assignment was on earth. So the dog came to God, and God said, here's what you need to do. You need to sit all day by the door of the humans and bark when someone you don't know is approaching the door. I will give you a lifespan of 20 years. And the dog says, I don't feel like barking for 20 years. Why don't we make it 10? I'll give you back 10 years. And God said, okay. Then a monkey came strolling up. And God says, what I want you to do is to be a circus monkey. I want you to entertain people, do monkey tricks, make people laugh and feel good. And I'll give you 20 years to do that. And the monkey says, well, it sounds like a lot of fun, but 20 years with this little body, I don't think I can handle it, so why don't we make it 10? I'll give you 10 back. Then a cow came strolling up. He says, what's my assignment? And God says, well, you're going to be a beast of burden. You're going to need to go out into the field with a farmer all day long. It'll be hot. It'll be sweaty. You'll suffer. But you'll also give birth to other cows, and you'll give milk to help support the human beings on the farm. And I will give you a lifespan of 60 years. And the cow said, whoa, 60 years of that? Doesn't sound very enticing to me. I'll tell you what, why don't you make it 20? I'll give you back 40 years. And then a human being came walking up. What's my assignment? And God said, well, eat, sleep, play. Be merry. Enjoy life. I'll give you 20 years. And the human being said, whoa, wait a minute, this sounds pretty good. I couldn't help overhear the other people or the other animals giving back the years. I'll take their years too. And God said, okay, we've got a deal, but you have to do what they were assigned to do. And this explains life. This is why for the first 20 years of life, we eat, sleep, play, do whatever we really want to do, and enjoy ourselves. Next 40 years, we slave in the sun to support our families. Next 10 years, we do monkey tricks to entertain our grandchildren. Then the last 10 years, we sit on the front porch and bark at everyone who goes by. Now, we're going to be doing, the unity orientation this afternoon for people who are, interested in finding out what unity is about. I have a lot of people who've come for a few months and like, well, I want to take it to the next level, maybe be a member. I have other people come to me and say, well, I want to learn more about this, but I don't know if I want to be a member yet. So we do, the orientation to give you a sense of unity. And one of the startling things people hear is that, unity does consider the Bible our basic textbook. But unity takes a different approach than any other denomination. We look at the Bible and we look at these marvelous stories, and we recognize there's symbolism embedded in all of them. Now, there are some stories, of course, in the Bible that make sense right away. You're like, wow, okay, I get it, and I even get the spiritual connotation of this. There are others where it's like, I get it, but I'm not sure what this has to do with spirituality. Then there are others you're like, I don't have a clue as to what this is about. And then there's another group of like, man, that really looks, that is so cruel, that is so human, I don't understand why this is in the Bible. And it's interesting how there are a lot of people that are trying to prove that the stuff that is in the Bible actually happened. Well, there is a lot of stuff that did happen, but there's also a lot of stuff that didn't, that's been proven, through science and archaeology. But in unity, we say, it doesn't matter. If we look at the symbolism in each of these stories, we see how, even though these may have been written 2,000 years ago, this is valuable stuff. This is stuff we can put into use here in the 21st century. So I wanted to take a look at a story from one of the four Gospels. Now, in our Bible, we've got the Hebrew Bible, which is more commonly known as the Old Testament, but we're trying to shift that and say, no, these were the Hebrew Scriptures, the Hebrew Bible. And, of course, you got the New Testament, which has four Gospels, which or at least say that they're representing what Jesus Christ's life was and what Jesus Christ's teachings were. And then there's the Acts of the Apostles that's written by Luke, who's one of the Gospels. And then you've got all of these letters afterwards. Some are by Paul, some are not. And then finally the book of Revelation, which is there just so we got something to talk about on Halloween. But there are four Gospels, so you got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they all seem to take a same kind of approach, and you got John. And John is really into the symbolism. And it was last of the four that were written. And they do contradict each other in many places. So that's why it's like you realize this is really about the underlying symbolism rather than what really happened. So let's turn to the book, or the Gospel of John, 2nd chapter, 13th verse. A lot of you are familiar with this, but we're going to dig a little deeper. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple he found dealers selling cattle, sheep, and doves. He found money changers seated at their tables. Jesus built a whip of cords, and he drove them all out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." Well, it makes a lot of sense at the literal level. But does this fit the image of a deeply spiritual man? A lot of people think of, Gandhi, Jesus, Buddha, just being calm all of the time. So for someone to get angry like that, is that spiritual? Well, it's okay to express your anger, maybe to yell or shout, provided you're not doing any harm to anyone else. So it says here, well, he drove out the animals, he overturned the tables. So it looks like there's some harm being done here. Now, the one thing we need to learn or need to understand about the temple, because I know when I, of course, was a kid and hear this, you think of the churches or the synagogues. So, if you were to show up here on Sunday and you found cows and sheep and doves in the foyer, how would you react? But the temple was not like that. See, what we were in is what would be a synagogue in the old Jewish days. Of course, synagogues still exist today. But the temple, there was only one temple, and that was in Jerusalem. And it was a big deal. And people would go there during the Passover. The Passover in Jerusalem was like Super Bowl week. Those of you remember what Super Bowl week was like here? I mean, you had all sorts of festivals, and people come in and they get real excited about the Super Bowl. Well, they get excited about the Passover. And of course, part of the Passover was that you had to sacrifice an animal. They were still into sacrificing animals back in that day. So they would come from all over the Middle East, traveling weeks at a time so they could be there for the Passover. And the temple, as it is described in the Bible, is a huge building. It was like Lucas Oil Stadium. Literally, it was that big. And if you, I remember when Carl and I came here to interview, and the person who was driving us in from the airport, suddenly there's this big brick building on the horizon. Like, what is that, a factory or whatever? Now imagine, 2,000 years ago, you're coming to Jerusalem from some small town, and some of you may have come to Indianapolis from a small town, and you see this big building. That's what it was like. And so you would come in through the gates, and like, if you're at Bankers Life Fieldhouse or Lucas Oil Stadium, what do you find inside the gates? The merchants. All of the concession stands, right? All of the programs, all of the bulletins. Can't tell the players without a scorecard. So people would come from all these places, and then they come there and they have to make an animal sacrifice. They're not going to bring the animals with them, so there were concession tables. And there'd be people, since people would come from all around, you had to exchange your money to make sure that you had legal tender for there in Jerusalem. So if you were really rich, you'd buy a cow. And of course, once the animal was slaughtered in a ritual, you could take it home for dinner or for meat or for a big feast maybe with all your family. Maybe you aren't so rich, so maybe you'd buy a sheep. And then if you're just scraping by, maybe you'd buy a dove or two. But that's the way it would work. And then you would come into what, say, would be the basketball court or the football field, and there, instead of a gridiron, you'd find steps going up to the Holy of Holies. There'd be this small box building in the middle, and that's where God was. And the priests would go in, and they'd connect with God, and then they'd come out, and they would do the ritual slaughter of your animal, and they'd spill the blood back into the ground so that life would be in the ground to give life to other things. That was what this was like. So when you hear, he walks into the temple and sees animals and stuff, so, well, of course. I mean, they're supposed to be there. There's nothing wrong with animals and money changers, is there? Really? And these merchants were providing a service. So Jesus comes in and does this, and people are like, what's going on here? And they were angry in reaction to him. There are also some problems, though, with the story. And that is, if you were to, say, walk in here and find sheep and goats and cows and doves, would you leave, make yourself a whip, and then come back? Or would you express your outrage immediately? So these are the little clues that we're talking about, some deep symbolism here, rather than just looking at it from a literal point of view. The merchants, the money changers, they were doing nothing wrong. They were doing what was expected of them. Now the temple. There are many places in the Bible. In fact, I just read from John 2nd chapter 13 through 16. In the 21st verse, as people are challenging him on why are you causing so much trouble, the disciples realize that he's not talking about the temple here. He's talking about the temple of the body. And Paul, in his 2 letters to the Corinthians, Corinthians 1, 6, 19, and 2 Corinthians 6, 16, he points out, the temple is your body. Your body is the temple that Jesus speaks of. Now, each of us has a body. Each of us has all of the characters in the Bible within us, including Jesus Christ. You have a Christ consciousness, that part of you that is always connected with God. Your mind is always connected with the divine mind. We can fall asleep to that, but we're always connected. And that Christ consciousness is consistently trying to have a worship service in your life. So are you letting it? So this is all about your inner state of mind, your inner attitudes. The Unity movement, was started by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore in 1889. And Charles, in one of his Sunday lessons in Kansas City there, back about a century ago, wrote, Deep within the heart of each individual, there is a worship service going on all the time. It never stops. That worship service is being conducted by the Christ consciousness within each of us. So for a worship service, we'd like it to be clean. We'd like it to be as pure as possible. You want a clean, free, and lovely temple for your worship service. Now, your body, you have different aspects of your body, right? Okay, we know that there's the Bible symbolism of the thinking nature and the feeling nature, represented by any male characters and any female characters. You've got the mind level, you've got the heart level, which is like more connected with the feelings, with the mind, and then, of course, the body. So, if the body is the living temple of God, then the mind would need to be cleansed so that we can think clearly, we can think constructively. Our heart needs to be cleansed so that we can feel harmony and peace rather than disharmony and conflict within our heart. And the definition of unconditional love is that we desire only good for ourselves and for everyone else. Can you truly say that? Can you desire good for everyone else? That's truly unconditional love. And then, of course, when our body is cleansed, we're talking about beyond just taking a shower, we're talking about good health, restored hearing. We're talking about vitality, strength. So with this worship service being guided by the Christ within, let's look at these symbols. Now the animals, well, first of all, the animals, the money changers and the dealers, when you look at the story, Jesus has come into the temple and he's upset that they're there. So have you ever had a situation in your life where you're upset about what you're thinking and what you're feeling? So you come into your temple within kind of that inner closet of yourself and you're like, okay, I got to deal with the situation. And you're feeling scrambled. It's like there's the pinball wizard inside playing games. The ball's bouncing all over the place. So the animals are not really animals 2,000 years ago. Animals are our most base instincts, thoughts, feelings. They're interfering with the right functioning of what it is you want to do, what you want to think about, what you want to feel about. So animals represent unnecessary negative emotions. Undisciplined, unproductive. There's no good to them, so to speak. So what are the kind of unnecessary emotions? One of the professors at Unity Seminar his definition for hell was useless, unnecessary suffering. That all of us have to suffer at times. All of us have to have, just challenges in our lives. But a lot of us like to set up camp there, rather than just, okay, yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I set up camp and woe be gone myself to the red. Well, no, I walk through the valley of death. I know you walk through, you don't stop. So that's the key here is, okay, what are some of the emotions that really don't really do you much good? Unhappy memories. I am the adult child of an alcoholic. Well, we get what we focus on. It's like, yeah, that happened, but can you see the blessing in it now? What about a grudge? Resentment, feelings of inferiority, feelings of superiority, envy, etc., etc., etc. These are all things that when we cling to them, it blocks us from expressing our highest good. So we're told that Jesus took time to make a whip of small cords to drive the animals out. Okay, symbolically, where would you find cords in your body? Your vocal cords. Your vocal cords. Small cords. So what Jesus symbolically shows us is we use our spoken word, our prayers of denial and our prayers of affirmation. Denials is where we recognize that something is happening here that isn't supposed to be happening, and we release it, and then we have an affirmation in which we affirm what it is we want to see happen. Now, many of you noticed in your bulletin and stuff that Andrea Worrell canceled her class on healing. Ironically, as she's getting ready to teach a class on spiritual healing, she has a recurrence of her cancer. So let's just, I know some of you have never met Andrea, but let's just hold Andrea in mind. Now, the denial would be, okay, Andrea, we see that you have cancer. But we now deny, dissolve, and release that cancer needs to take residence in your body. Though you have been given a diagnosis of cancer, this does not need to be a permanent diagnosis. This cancer no longer has any power over you. These are all forms of denial. And then with an affirmation, we say, Andrea, we see you embracing the divine idea of perfect health. We see you emerging from this therapy that the doctors have prescribed for you, free of cancer, regaining your energy, your vitality, and being able to express the light that you are once again. Amen. So you do a denial and you do an affirmation. What's your situation? Is it finances? Is it just that you're in a lousy job? Do you have a health challenge? What is it? This is what you use denials and affirmations for. You drive the animals out of the temple for a start. You want to let go of the cluttered thinking, the cluttered feelings. I mean, you can imagine with Carla having surgery tomorrow, Carla and I have had to deal with a few animals in the hallway. The emotions that come up. But by doing that, and it's interesting because you realize it says that all he did was drive the animals from the temple. It doesn't even say that he struck them or did any injury to them. So that's important for you too, is let's not beat ourselves up with a whip of cords. Let's not speak words against ourselves. How could I be so stupid? Well, that's a great affirmation. What would you prefer to say? I am much wiser now. I am much wiser now. Now, the money changers and the dealers. So have you ever found yourself in a challenging situation and it seems like all you can think about is the financial ramifications? Oh, God, how much is this going to cost? Oh, God, do we have enough money? Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God. So have you had those kinds of thoughts? So our merchandisers, our dealers, our money changers are representing when we put something above God. Something is more important than God. A lot of people sell out, they do something for the money rather than what they know in their heart they need to do. So, what did Jesus do? He overturned the tables. He put God first. This has become part of our vernacular, right? He turned the tables on the guy. Yeah, you changed it. You turned it upside down. If something is above God in your consciousness, it needs to be below God. God needs to come first. It's like Emmett Fox's The Golden Key. Whatever your problem is, take your focus off of that and focus on God, because whatever you focus on is going to expand. So, the first step in cleansing the temple is to just drive out this emotional energy. And it sounds so simple, but it works. Like Jesus, another example is Jesus saying, "Get ye behind me, Satan." I love it when I'll see these TV evangelists talk about how they're going to fight Satan and they're going to beat Satan. What did Jesus say? Just get out of my sight. Get out of my focus. Maybe you exist, which of course, we believe that this is negativity. And if you cling to that, you end up in a cluttered temple. So, Jesus has given us the tools. We need to cleanse our mind of confused thinking and false beliefs. Cleanse our heart of all unnecessary emotions. And cleanse the body of any congestion of energy or any illnesses or disease. So, I'm going to have Karen put up this week's takeaways. They're on the front page of your bulletin. So, we start by cleansing the temple. That is, we let go of the useless, unnecessary suffering. We use denials to say, okay, I'm not going to attach myself to that thought anymore. I'm not going to attach myself to that feeling. It's not going to be permanent in me anymore. And then, continuous forgiveness of self and others. Just letting go of that energy. And as I've talked about in other talks, there are people that say you need to forgive and forget. No, you need to forgive. You'll always remember it, but can you remember it and say, now I see the blessing in it? There's no more emotional attachment. Number 3, silent meditation and spoken prayer. Go within, be quiet, get centered, and then speak the prayers of denials or affirmations to suit the situation in your life. And then number 5 is to study unity books and classes. Immerse yourselves. When I go to the gym a couple times a year, seems like that way. It's been like that over this last week, but yeah, I go to work out a few times a week. And I remember, I'll listen to recordings, generally of professors from Unity Seminary, or previous ministers that Carla and I know. Many of them now have passed away. But it helps me even get centered, keep my mind in that place. And that's why I'm encouraging all of you to get the book Prosperity's 10 Commandments. We just launched our fall focus here 2 weeks ago with Edwin Gaines being here. But if you get that book, it's in the bookstore, Prosperity's 10 Commandments. And we've got a couple of groups, one on Sunday evenings, one on Wednesday evenings, going through that book about a couple chapters at a time. But even if you can't make the group, please read that book. We have set the intention for greater prosperity for all of us as individuals and for us as a community. So, continuing with our animal theme, our closing story is a 2-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News about 2 men from Texas who have a unique perspective on dog training.
I came to Fort Worth, Texas, thinking I'd seen everything, when out rolled evidence to the contrary. A guy on a mower pulling 9 dogs on a train. That's a new one. In fact, the only thing more surprising than the sight may be the story behind it. This train ride is the brainchild of brothers Eugene and Walter Bostic, and it's just a small part of a much larger mission. The Bostics, who live in the same 11-acre woods they grew up in, spend thousands of dollars a year just feeding the wildlife here.
You name them. Coon, beaver, possum. No, we don't. Yeah, the beaver does eat corn and bread. Sure
yeah.
does. Mm-hmm. Quack, quack, quack. See, that's over there.
They don't miss so much as a mallard. And if you're wondering why they have this insatiable need to feed, the answer is simple. Childhood guilt.
When we first moved here,
We killed them all.
the rule of the day, anything that moved, we shot.
But now these repentant hunters are making amends in any way they can think of. Which brings us back to the train.
Come on, buddy, going train riding.
Over the years, a lot of stray dogs have wandered onto the property. Of course, they're cared for. But that wasn't enough for the Bostic boys,
Okay.
who thought these mutts might enjoy a little movement as well.
Well, we're probably ready.
Be surprised how good it makes you feel when you see them loading up and how happy they are.
The train departs once a week for an hour of pure joy. The mangy misfits, now the envy of the neighborhood. The dogs no one wanted, now like celebrities on a catwalk. Their giant choo-choo toy takes the dogs mostly through the local warehouse district. But for the brothers, each trip takes them one step closer to redemption. They say all dogs go to heaven, and if that's true, there's gotta be room for those who engineer their happiness. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Fort Worth, Texas.
From the book of Genesis, 1st chapter, 25th verse. And God made the animals of the earth according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all of the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. It is now time for our tithes and offerings. And for over 100 years, Unity of Indianapolis has been a positive path for spiritual living. And I personally am just so grateful for all of us who came together yesterday and just went through the special bonding of just spending an afternoon together with good food and good music. Various people from our congregation just got up and sang spontaneously. Sally, Applegate Roadman, playing the piano for all of them without rehearsal. And recognize what this place has meant to you and what it means to me. And let's open our heart and pour love into this offering, because whatever we give unconditionally and in love comes back to us multiplied. And then let's say the affirmation on the screen together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, all that I receive, and I am grateful.
When I am feeling my worst and my body has let me down, when gravity seems like a curse and I wear a heavy frown, I remember that nobody needs plastic body perfection, and people of substance and age need far less direction to learn to live in joy and motion, to live in peace despite commotion. God is transforming me. God is transforming me into things I could never imagine, into beauty I couldn't see. God is transforming me. When I go all existential, when I wonder why I'm here, when I question my potential and my mind is filled with fear, I pause to remember that love is my foundation, and acceptance of myself is its own inspiration, to learn to live in joy and motion, to live in peace despite commotion. God is transforming me. God is transforming me into things I could never imagine, into beauty I couldn't see. God is transforming me. God's love surrounds me. God's love astounds me. It changes and amazes me. It moves me and raises me to new heights I've never known before. That's how I know for sure. God is transforming me. God is transforming me into things I could never imagine, into beauty I couldn't see. God is transforming me. God is transforming me into things I could never imagine, into beauty I couldn't see. God is transforming me.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you, Natalie. Yeah, Natalie isn't in the bulletin, but Natalie Coffin teamed up with Martha.
That's because I called her this morning on the way.
At 8. At 8.
And I know Natalie. Now, one of the ways we can have this great music here regularly is, when a guest musician comes in, if you'd be willing to purchase their CDs. So Martha's got some of her CDs in the friendship room there, right outside the book and gift shop. Natalie, I don't know if you bought your CD or not, but
No, typically I have them, but I didn't even know.
so yeah, check that out in
Most
the
of you guys
friendship room
already have
afterwards.
them.
A couple quick reminders, like I mentioned, there are these little business cards you can give to other people. It gives you some information about the church, the website, that kind of a thing. So think about people you know who you think might resonate. Just ask them to come and check us out. Now, remember that everything that's purchased in the book and gift shop, all of the proceeds go to support Unity of Indianapolis. On page 2 of your bulletin is the information about the new Kroger Community Program. Kroger will donate money to Unity of Indianapolis, a percentage of all that you purchase at Kroger, but you need to register for that. So check out page 2 on that. And just to give you a heads up, every January 1st, you have to renew that registration so that they know that we're still the people you want to give that to. But if you register for that, that would be very helpful. And also encourage people to just look for ways you can help in volunteering here at Unity of Indianapolis. Now, right afterwards, we've got a pitch-in. I know we've got a few people who've just moved to Indianapolis from out of town. Pitch-in is what we call a potluck here in central Indiana. So we've got our pitch-in, and then we've got our community chat, just bringing you up to date on some of the things that are going on at the church. And then at 12:15, I'll do that first What is Unity orientation class. So take your bulletins with you so you've got all of the information on that. And if you do want someone to pray with you, at the end of the service, come to the front here, look for a chaplain rather than go straight to the friendship room, okay? Let's do a blessing over the offering. We are so grateful that we had something to give. And we see this amazing spiritual and financial energy working its way through many ministries of this spiritual community. And we see it working its way out into central Indiana, touching all with the consciousness of cleansing the temple, letting go of negative emotions, being willing to, whenever a negative emotion comes into our minds, to just release them and know the truth. God, we are one with God, and God can handle anything. So we accept that ease and effortless energy of God, active in our lives at all times. And so it is. Amen. Let's sing in our children.